Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, sir. I want to ask you, are you surprised at all to see the Taliban making gains this aggressively?
No.
Tell me why.
Tragic beyond belief, but it's both predicted and predictable. And essentially, though the Afghan army is 350,000 strong and the Canadians spent years there, Americans even more so, along with their British compatriots, if you take away the final element of international support from soldiers and air power, then the Afghan soldiers might well lose hope. And I suspect and submit that's exactly what's happened, which has destroyed their will to resist.
Is it inevitable that the Taliban will take Kabul?
Almost certainly, tragically. And there's been several waves over the last 20 to 30 years of what happens when elements such as the Taliban, who are not by any means one group that's similar in thought and procedure, but rather a collection that crosses tribal boundaries. And so there's no chain of command. There's no respect for the rule of law. And what they're probably going to do to those who helped NATO forces, or those who aspired as women to become parliamentarians or doctors or soldiers, is probably going to be unbelievably tragic.
I'm going to ask you about that, more about that in just a moment, but we are learning today that there is an urgent effort underway right now by the Americans using the military to get some of their civilian staff out of the American embassy because it's just simply not safe right now. Canada has an embassy there. What should Canada be doing?
Well, it's a question. I'm not privy to detailed, highly classified intelligence, but if the Americans are doing it, that's a pretty good sign that we should probably consider doing something similar. Getting some out doesn't mean all, and let's not forget, there's still thousands, perhaps, of local Afghans who have worked hard alongside the Canadian forces, and it's our hope as veterans, and that they'll be somehow brought out, or a certain number of them. So you've got to have some elements there who can process them.
Yeah, the Americans say it's not a full closure of the embassy, but they are getting some civilian staff out. At least that's the plan right now. The Biden administration is not reconsidering its plan to pull its troops out of Afghanistan. But given the volatility, should there not be a conversation about whether the Americans should pause or reconsider what their plan is?
Look, I understand President Biden's decision. I've interacted with him several times when he was chair of the relevant Senate committee on 3 different occasions over the years. But I think he's made a mistake. And I think the gradual reduction of especially American personnel, down from a height of around 100,000 to what was 5,000 up until a couple of months ago. If they could have kept it at 5,000, that would have continued to give hope and certain capabilities to the Afghan forces, and we almost certainly wouldn't be in this position. So a reconsideration is possible. Is he going to do it? I don't know, but I have an additional comment on that.
Tell me, what else do you think that we should be talking about around this conversation about the Biden administration and its plan right now? And from what I understand and what we're hearing from American journalists who are doing a lot of reporting on this is that there's polling suggesting that to pull out of Afghanistan, it is a popular decision among American voters, and that keeping troops in Afghanistan is not a popular thing to do in that context. What else do you want to say about this situation, and what do you make of that?
Well, the fact that it's not popular, he's right. I spent quite a lot of time down in the United States as part of the NAFTA discussions, and when I was a parliamentarian, and even more so when I was a soldier. And the Americans have a sense that their allies, their friends, have, in the main, abandoned them to do most of the heavy lifting, as they've done historically. Canada pulled out of there in terms of the combat mission. We stopped doing the combat operations in 2010. We pulled our troops out in 2014, and we were the first of the sort of the heavy lifters to withdraw completely. And this got to the culminating point where the Americans had the sense of resentment. Why should they spend their blood and treasure when not everyone else is around them to do so? So I don't think President Biden's going to change his mind. His point of view is almost certainly, look, there's a 350,000 person Afghan army. Surely they can fight for themselves. But once you take away that element of hope, it's really, really tough to get troops to fight the way that they should and must.
As you watch the situation unfold, there are reports now that Kandahar could fall next. Given the sacrifices made by Canada and Canadians, do you feel frustrated?
I feel sad. Yes, frustration is part of it. As a Canadian, I have no moral right to criticize the Americans for pulling out, considering we pulled out years before. I'm not suggesting it should turn into yet another forever war, but there does come a time when you have to make judgments in the interests of international peace and stability and not necessarily on domestic politics. So it's not criticizing the Americans per se, it's criticizing all of us who spent a great deal of time, money, blood, and treasure. And we educated women, we built schools for the girls, we encouraged women to join a whole host of professional occupations. And I shudder to think what's going to happen to those women and girls over the course of what could be, the next 5-6 weeks, maybe a month before not only Kandahar falls, but Kabul won't be far behind.
I was going to ask, that sort of flows into what I wanted to ask you next. Do you have any predictions for where the state of Afghanistan, what you see happening 6 months from today? What will the state of the country be?
There will be, tragically, in my opinion, an orgy of bloodshed, targeting those who've helped us in the West, helping those who aspired to better themselves and their families through education, or through roles that have not traditionally been filled by women in that culture and society. The Taliban will fracture. They're currently unified with the vision of evicting all foreign elements. They'll fracture down into their tribal groupings again, and you'll have that type of warfare, which will permeate almost the entirety of the society. And probably sometime after 6 months, you may well have elements of ISIL, ISIS, Al-Qaeda showing up again to seek a safe haven amidst the chaos of what was a nascent emerging nation state. Does this sound familiar, by the way?
It's as we have spoken to a number of experts, they have pointed out, one interview we did a couple of weeks ago bluntly said we've seen this movie before. The Canadian government has struggled to find a way to efficiently get Afghan contractors that help the Canadian mission to Canada. We understand that much of the work happens in secret for security purposes. But from your perspective, from what you're watching unfold right now, is there anything that stands out to you that could be done to make this process, to get these people to safety in Canada? Is there anything that could be done better?
Well, first and foremost, I'm not one of those with boots on the ground, and I have nothing but admiration for the soldiers and the public servants who are there trying to process people who used to work alongside us. But you've got to make it better, faster, smarter. And as you get closer to the final tipping point of the crisis, specifically, when can aircraft safely land and take off in Kabul, which is not far away. When you get to that tipping point, you just got to accept a certain amount of risk. Maybe you process them in Canada or in a third nation. I don't know. I don't have a solution. But whatever you're doing, you got to do more of it. You got to do it better, faster, smarter, or else literally hundreds, if not more, of those who are looking to us for safety and refuge won't get it. In many cases, they'll be outside of their normal cities, having traveled to Kabul, and they'll be easy prey for the Taliban.
One last thing I'd like to ask you about is something happening here in Canada, and that is the situation around Art McDonald. He says he wants to return to his position as Chief of the Defence Staff. The Defence Minister says that Mr. McDonald will be on administrative leave until further notice. What do you think should happen here?
Well, first and foremost, my heart goes out to all of those impacted by misogyny, sexual misconduct, sexual assault, and the Canadian Armed Forces must continue to do much better. I think Wayne Eyre is doing a great job right now. I don't really know enough details to pass judgment on the Admiral McDonald case in terms of specifics, but an important issue is why is there confusion about who's in charge? This is a really serious discussion point. And in certain scenarios, not knowing who the CDS is or might be tomorrow can have an operational impact. And quite frankly, this is the sort of decision which should have been sorted out weeks ago, because it's logical to assume that eventually it would be rendered on Admiral McDonald and the conduct of the investigation, all that kind of stuff. So why wasn't the answer ready now? This is not acceptable.
One other thing I want to ask you, though, is, is the standard, given the systemic issues that have been pointed out in the Canadian military and the Canadian forces and some of the structural challenges that we've seen here, should the standard be whether criminal charges are laid or not, or is there a higher standard that someone in this position needs to meet?
I believe there's a code of ethics which supersedes or sits at the top, if you would, of the hierarchy of behavioral norms. And that's something that, of course, those who are charged with making the decision will have to balance with the facts as have come out in the investigation by the police, and various commentary by lawyers, and also, hopefully, impact statements from victims. So I'm not in a position to give any more information than that because I honestly don't know. Once again, I'm reluctant to pass judgment unless I can get a clearer picture of what's going on. And right now, it's kind of confusing.
And that's a point you want to make there, that this decision has come down and there still isn't any sort of direction yet. And that is your concern right now.
Yeah, and as well, why did the gentleman or Admiral McDonald think that he was coming back? Was he supposed to? Was no one talking to him? Why wasn't some sort of thought given to what the options were? Should such a verdict come out as to whether or not charges would or would not be laid? And why the last minute tension and pressure on an issue which impacts the operational credibility of the Canadian Armed Forces? And let's not forget, the current acting CDS, General Eyre, is doing a fine job, but there can be no uncertainty in his mind is that he's in charge. And there's a variety of scenarios where it's the criticality of having a clear-cut chain of command is paramount. So don't mess with that, please.
Andrew Leslie, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Katie.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.